Hello, thanks for tuning in again. Yes, so I'm going to continue answering some questions in relation to my work, in relation to stripping it right back, in relation to trying to systemize the human mind and relay it to you. So yes, one of the questions I'm often asked is, I'm often talking about we need to change the narrative to move forward. Well, what do I mean by we need to change the narrative? So yes, anyway, there's a lot to cover here, so I'll just pull one thread out of the ear and we'll run with that. The language of war is built in. What do I mean by that? Okay, the language of war is built into our narrative. It's a knot in the narrative. There are many our narratives are riddled with knots. In our narratives, if you get into the intertextuality of our narratives, there's a lot of good in our narratives. We talk about equality, we talk about love, we talk about peace, we poeticize our place in the world, okay? And that's a beautiful way to narrate ourselves, okay, our narrative. But our narrative is also riddled with knots, as I have said. And part of understanding that is about understanding the idea that the language of war is built in. So let me explain what I mean by that first. So when our so-called elite masters declare war on another nation of people, it doesn't come, it doesn't take a lot to instigate war. It doesn't take a lot to rile us up and ready us for war, because we already have the narrative of division, them and us. We believe ourselves to be nations, English, Irish, American, Russian, Chinese, and so on. So already in our narrative is a knot, the idea of separation, that we are separate from our brothers and sisters. We are separate from their children, and their children are separate from ours. That's an abomination in our narrative, in our collective narrative. So yeah, the language of war is already built in, as I have said. We also have the language of hierarchy and class built in, the idea that people can be categorized in different packages, okay? We give different standards to people to classify, to categorize a person as working class, middle class, upper class, or in India, the caste system, and so on. We categorize people in so many different ways, and none of them have fundamental foundations. They're all based on illusion, and so on. But it is part of the global head, the global collective narrative. So war is already built in, as I have said, because we believe the Iraqi people to be different than the American people or the English people, okay? The majority of people seem to think in this manner. Because, like I said, it's part of our narrative, the idea that war is built in, fear is built into us, territory is built into us, have and have not is built into our narrative. And that's all tied up in the knots of how we approach and instigate war. Why do we go to war with other people? If you look back along our historical text, okay, it's always been based on them and us, that we are superior to them. The idea of superiority and inferiority is part of our narrative. We wouldn't have class systems if those notions were not knots in the collective global head, and so on. So yes, so if you watch even capitalism, how it's built into us, how we are separated from one another, how we have been all isolated and compartmentalized into the idea that we're individuals surviving in this existential pond alone, okay? And to get ahead, you have to trip others up, get ahead by any means necessary. That seems to be the driving maxim of this capitalist age, and so on. But that's also the language of war, this idea that you have to get ahead and jump on the back of your brothers and sisters to get ahead and to exploit them, and so on. That is the language of war. Exploitation is the language of war. It's passive aggressiveness, it's, physical aggressiveness, and so on. So the fact is, we're at war every day. We're at war with ourselves, we're at war with our planet, we're at war with our neighbours, we're at war because our narrative is crooked. And in a crooked narrative, a crooked narrative is a mindset that's crooked, because the narrative is just an extension of how the mind works and sees this reality, and so on. So yes, so our narrative has to change. And anyway, to go back to capitalism, if you watch any movie on, Tom Cruise gets the girl, wins the day with violence, okay? And, you always see the rich having it all. It's sold to us in such a glamorous way. Greed is good, and 10 cars and 10 big houses, and you're a better person because you have the best shoes, okay? That's part of our narrative, okay? The shoes make it the man, and so on. And the diamonds, and so on. Diamonds are a girl's best friend, and the posh chandelier is the centerpiece of your home, and so on. And it's all tied up into concepts of status and standard, okay? And once again, these are knots in the narrative. And there's nothing wrong. One of the problems with the narrative is, like, we have turned status and standard into we have categorize people in different ways, like I said, and we've brutalized that concept. But there's nothing wrong with status and standard. You know, I have standardized manners. My status is built around transcendental thought. My status is about equality for all human beings and so on. So I hold status, that gives me status as a human being. Okay, but we have corrupted that word. We have given status to those up on higher branches and so on. So anyway, rambling as always, but I'm just trying to paint a picture for you of our narrative. So our narrative is riddled with knots, and in those knots, if you get into them all of those knots, they have gave rise to holocausts. And okay, like I said, in the class system and the abomination that is capitalism. And like I said, every single thing is about, you know, those who have, you know, it's always glamorized, and we're all, from the moment we're born, we're like, you know, have more, have more, have more, the haves and the haves not, you know, we have fear is built around, you know, fear is built around poverty, and rightly so. But anyway, all of this, like I said, keeps us in a mental knot and keeps us in a state of fear and a state of instability. And like when I was talking in the last stream, it was all about how do we stabilize the human mind. So we are kept in an unstable stream of reality, and it's killing all of us. So we have to change the narrative, and that's what I'm about. You know, I want to change the narrative. And so, you know, I believe after our long evolution out of the dark, we're still, you know, tied up in our animal ego selves, okay? And that's why the narrative is so crooked. So we have to transcend the narrative, and we have to do that, our language has to move away from the bad structures of language. Okay, parents often tell their children not to use swear words like fuck and shit and cunt and piss and all of that, okay? But that's not really a broad understanding of what bad language is, okay? Capitalism is built on the structures of bad language, okay? Monarchy is built on the structures of bad language. All the pseudo-religions have been built on the structures of bad language. So our language, you know, when you get into this, filthy. The narrative is filthy dirty, okay? So that's to begin with transcending ourselves and to move away from the narrative, we have to start narrating ourselves around what is corrupt in our language, what is dirty in our language, what corrupts the network, okay? What corrupts the network, the carpet narrative that we guide ourselves by, if you will. So yes, to transcend it is to transcend it, to abstract from it and understand it and see all those structures in it, okay? The class structures of reality, the upstairs, downstairs mentality, the privileged and the underdog. Even the language of war, like I said, the language has authority built in, okay? The idea of authority, that somebody is above me on a higher branch. Let me just quickly explain that. You know, if I'm walking down the road and somebody's knocked down and hurt badly, and a doctor turns up to help, and that doctor asks me for my help, okay? I'm obviously going to give that doctor my time. And if he or she, the doctor, tells me to run and get blankets and run and get hot water and run and call the police, whatever is asked of me, I will do in a noble way to the best of my ability. I will follow their rules. I will follow the orders that they give me. However, when it's all over and the person is taken away in an ambulance and so on, if that doctor, if he or she then asks me to carry their bags, I will tell them where to go and run and jump, basically, because they're not an authority over me. And it's crucial that you understand this in relation to changing the narrative, in relation to understanding what authority is, okay? In a situation where a doctor is needed, the doctor is the authority. In a situation where a firefighter is needed, the firefighter is the authority. When we're looking for a cure for a virus, okay, the epidemiologist is the authority, okay? But that does not give any of them an authority over another human being, okay? So there's a huge discrepancy in how we see authority, and it's not in the global collective narrative and so on. So we have to transcend that, abstract from it like I have just done. I've broken it down for you to show you what authority is. So we need to pull away from our ideas of what authority, what class is, that the idea of people are being different nations, black and white, them and us, gay and straight, male and female, and so on. And we need to start to categorize ourselves in the correct fashion so we can build on better notions of what we are and what we mean to one another. So that's all about changing the narrative. And so we have to transcend ourselves. And now the system I keep relaying to people, okay, on all the axioms and so on, that is all. I do not talk like, that I'm not on the hamster wheel. Okay, if you listen to my work, okay, I am attempting at the very least to give the human mind some kind of systemic agency, because nobody fucking understands it. Simple as that. Nobody understands the compass in our heads, and if we don't understand the compass, we can't line it up to get out of this dark that we are in on this day. So understanding the compass too, the systemic compass in our heads, is all about addressing the narrative in a new way. Understanding that we have an animal side to our nature, an egotistical side to our nature, okay, and there could be benefits to that because we are animals and egos that we have to eat and fuck and live and abide by one another and so on. You know, that's part of our nature. But to understand what we are in this reality, to understand what we are in relation to what God might be, we have to become transcendental giants, and that's all about shifting the narrative, as I have said. Anyway, I hope you've got something from that. Anyway, any more questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And thanks for tuning in again. Peace and love and logic.